an action plan for Ukraine. That's what I'd like to talk about today. But before we get off on Ukraine, happy St. Patrick's Day to you. Top of the morning to you, and the proper reply to that is, and the rest of the day to yourself. Not for nothing am I married to an Irish woman. In the Ukraine, the United States can't just simply sit by and let him annex Crimea and then probably invade the rest of the Ukraine. We've got to take bold and decisive action, and even this president must realize that. The first thing we should do is to reopen discussions with Poland and the Czech Republic about putting anti-missiles there, missile interceptors there. Bush had worked out a deal with them, and the whole thing had been on track. And then the first thing Obama did when he took office was to repeal that, cancel the plans to put the missiles in, acceding to Russia's demand. That was Russia's #1 foreign policy demand. Russia believes that those missiles are there to intercept Russian missiles fired at the rest of the world, and indeed they may be. We claim that they're there to intercept Iranian missiles that could be fired. But, you know, one man's interceptor could be another man's interceptor too. The United States, in an effort to win Putin's love and affection, canceled that deployment, which really sent shockwaves throughout Eastern Europe. It was tantamount to telling them, we're not going to defend you. We should immediately get those missiles back in there. That would be an effective reply to what Russia is doing in the Ukraine, and would make them hesitate before they stepped over that Ukrainian border. Secondly, we should send a large shipment of military supplies, including conventional weapons, to the Ukraine. The Ukraine used to have a pretty good-sized army, but in the first decade of this century, it disarmed in response to an initiative by Yeltsin, who was then the head of Russia, Clinton, and various other Western leaders. And in response to their entreaties, the Ukraine got rid of its ammunition dumps, got rid of its artillery shells, and got rid of its surface-to-air missiles. And the powers that asked it to disarm promised jointly to secure its borders. And that was widely interpreted as an American commitment to make sure that the Ukraine was not invaded by Russia. And now we're just walking away from that commitment. Instead, we should be sending large amounts of arms to the Ukraine. Planes should be arriving every single day loaded with tanks and other munitions. And the United States should send a small number of Americans and NATO personnel to train them and to help deploy those weapons, a few hundred. That will create a tripwire, which will stop the Russians from even thinking about invading. Russia will not ever put itself in a position where it's causing American casualties. It didn't throughout the Cold War, it wouldn't now. And that's a very important step for us to take. In addition, we should make sure that the IMF and the EU move quickly in rendering financial aid to the Ukraine and stabilizing its economy. These are essential steps we've got to take immediately to bolster the Ukraine and to make sure that it remains or becomes an outpost of freedom. The point here is not to manipulate the Ukraine in some geopolitical war with Russia, or to extend the boundary of NATO deep into what used to be the USSR. The point is that 45 million people want freedom, and we should be there, we should support it, we should sustain it. And if we don't, that's going to send a signal to Russia that it can do whatever it wants. In the longer term, but again immediately, longer-term impact, but immediately in terms of action, we should deregulate exports of natural gas from the United States. Nothing will more undermine Russian power than natural gas exports going all over the world. Oil can be exported, of course, because you put it in a ship, but natural gas you can't. So you have to liquefy it, put it in a ship, ship it to where you want to go, then deliquefy it, regasify it, and put it inside a pipeline. Because of that, Russia can maintain a geopolitical stranglehold over Eastern Europe and influence Western Europe, because it supplies a quarter of Europe's natural gas, including almost all the natural gas for Eastern Europe, through a pipeline. It can just turn that pipeline off. If the United States moves ahead with the construction of 27 liquefied natural gas facilities whose applications are currently pending, and if Congress passes legislation saying it is no longer necessary to get special permits to export natural gas from the United States, there'll be a massive flow of natural gas to Europe from the U.S., have a minimal impact on prices in the U.S., but will be a source of security to Europe that will ultimately render Putin impotent, not just in the short term, but in the long term. So that's the stuff we ought to be doing right now. Thanks for watching.